Welcome to the Audio Description Network Alliance podcast series. Today we have a very special bonus episode where I am interviewing someone who has been editing all the podcasts for, how long has it been?
Since the beginning of time, since the dawn of man. I don't know. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I mean, of these 100 that have been released, or more than 100 at this point, it seems like you've done, if not half, close to half. And we can talk about that. We can talk about what you do and all this other stuff. This is Byron Lee, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So excited to interview you. Tables are turned.
Well, I'm really excited to finally do this with you because, you know, I have definitely formulated answers to these questions that I hear every week. And so I'm like, oh, I have an interesting response to that question. So I finally get to dispense with my wisdom, I guess.
Sure. Either way, it's like, what do you do with a salt shaker? Just sprinkle it. So let's start with what you love about audio description.
You know, audio description is so awesome. The first time I ever saw audio description was when I was a teenager in high school, and there was a lending library that had VHS tapes from WGBH, and I saw The Nutty Professor with audio description. And there were so many things that happened on screen that I completely missed. And I was like, wow, this is great. I'm catching on to things that I never would have noticed. And then there was Alien, the first of the Alien movies. And when it finally hit home how great this was for me was when there was a scene where some people were walking down a corridor of a spaceship, and you saw their boots hitting the deck, right? There was a tentacle sliding around in the background that I never would have noticed. And that gave a whole new meaning to that scene, that the alien was just behind them. And I would have completely missed that without audio description. So I love audio description and think it's just so awesome that it exists. And I use it every day now. I have some vision. I'm what they call a high partial, someone that is legally blind, but still has quite a bit of vision. And I didn't think that I needed such a thing until I actually got to try it. And realized it's great for things like text messages, subtitles, you know, scenes where they're trying to show you something lurking in the shadows and maybe you would miss it if you couldn't see very well. So even someone who has sight, man, you can find a lot of uses for audio description.
What a great answer. It's so good. What about a challenge that you've had in audio description that you're very proud that you overcame?
So I'm not a audio description professional. I have worked among audio description professionals like my boyfriend, Chris Snyder, and the people over at Audio Eyes. I've done some work for them, but I would say a personal challenge that I overcame that I'm really proud of is doing my own full feature movie, full length movie as sort of like a volunteer thing. I wanted to put together a audio description for a Weird Al movie called UHF. And so I sat down and I watched the movie, paused it, really analyzed the scenes, wrote the script, sat down and recorded the audio tracks and mixed it myself. It took hours of my time, but it was a labor of love because it's a movie that I think is full of lots of really funny visual gags, lots of things that blind people miss when they watch this movie. And I was so proud of myself for having made an audio description version of this movie, and it was never released commercially. It's available if you know where to look on the interwebs, but it's not a commercial release. And I hope somebody does do it commercially. But I just thought that was kind of a really cool thing that I have accomplished as far as audio description. Another audio description accomplishment, I did a episode of Malcolm in the Middle, and I've done some other audio descriptions as well. And it's something that I do hope that I get more and more involved in as I learn the trade. I'm actually learning how to use Pro Tools right now. So I'm editing your podcast in Pro Tools now. Just started doing that a couple weeks ago. And that's a piece of software that's very popular in the audio engineering industry, and a lot of audio description artists, voiceover artists and engineers use Pro Tools in the trade. And so if getting into audio description is something that I really want to do, Pro Tools is a piece of software that I need to learn how to use. So I've got Pro Tools, and I also got, from the income that I have earned from, doing podcast editing for you and for other people like Chris Peterson in the Penny Forward podcast, I have actually amassed enough money to buy a control surface. I've got this board here with a bunch of channels. I can fade things up and down on a real honest to goodness control surface. I can move the jog wheel back and forth and adjust where I'm at in the audio file. I can make cuts. I can rewind in minuscule amounts of time, like a quarter of a second, a fraction of a second. I can go back and eliminate that little clearing of the throat or the or the. It's really cool that I finally have, thanks to you, Roy, because you were sort of the one that got me to believe in myself and my own self-worth. There's a lot of blind people, when we find work, a lot of times we take a lower pay grade because we're happy to have the work. We're just happy that someone wanted to hire us in the first place. And so a lot of us will take less money than we're worth. And when you came to me and said that you were looking for an editor, I tried to lowball myself. I was like, well, I don't know. I could do it for this much. And you're like, no, I'm gonna pay you a fair wage. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. And so you got me feeling like I have the ability to put out good work and charge people an appropriate price for it. So now I've got a thriving audio editing business happening now, which is just really, that's really awesome. And I kind of owe it to you for giving me the guts to go out and ask for the money I think I'm worth.
Oh, well, thanks for saying so. And it was great that, I think it was Anthony that introduced us, because I was complaining to him about I'm overwhelmed. I like editing. I'm good at it, but I just didn't have the time for it. And he suggested you. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I've learned from any engagement, whether it's through you directly and some other people, is that when these conversations come up, that there is value. And what I loved about our conversation is that I had a need and you had a way to take care of that need in a way that allowed mm-hmm. me to take care of the other things that I wanted to do. So that value that you brought me is something that I recognized as worth paying for. And I think if we could tie this back into audio description, is that there is a really fascinating parallel, that this work of audio description that was created by blind people for blind people, that there is this really weird temptation that it's like we're providing a service for blind people. And as a sighted person, or even as a blind person, there is this, I want to serve. There is this kind of volunteer effort. And where I find my experience, and it's like, let's use our experience as professionals, that I wanted to hire you as an engineer to fulfill a need. And I've been able to let go of that in a way and trust that you're doing it in a way that is professional. Now, obviously you're talking about all those buttons and dials and things that are beyond my pay grade, but it's like these kinds of things are things that that you can deliver because of your experience and your professionalism. And that's something of value to me. And I'm hoping that in audio description, that's something that we can look at too and say, you don't have to have an open heart and cut yourself short. That there's this really nuanced conversation that I'm so excited to have with you about this. Can you talk a little bit about any aspect of that?
Audio description is a booming opportunity for blind people. We've proven, thanks to people like Chris Snyder and Satana and various other people out there who are blind, who are working in this industry, we've proven that blind people are capable of doing the work. They are capable of doing voiceovers. They're capable of doing audio editing. They're capable of doing quality assurance. They're capable of script writing. And I think that there are a lot of companies in this industry who don't realize that yet. And they think of it as, we are serving the blind. We are providing a service to the blind. And so it's counterintuitive to them, they don't realize that we are aching for jobs. We are aching for professional lifestyles, that we want to get out there in the workforce and not just live on Social Security. And so they go, well, we're serving the blind and we're doing a wonderful thing, but we don't have any blind people on staff. And I think that's really a shame. I think that needs to change. I think there needs to be more blind people out there. And likewise, there needs to be more effort put into making blind people aware that this is something that should be a viable career path.
And talking about skills, that there is this development that you've been able to do through learning Pro Tools and by getting your gear and by, just the practice, that you are becoming competitive in a way that brings you to being a professional, that you're on the same page as any blind or sighted person, that the blindness or sight doesn't matter as far as your skills go, and that hurdle is something that a lot of sighted people seem to put as a barrier to entry, not only in getting the work but also getting the experience that can lead to that professionalism in the work. I don't know if that's something that is an assumption I'm making, or maybe could we talk a little bit more about that, the training to becoming a professional and how that works?
One of the things that I do as my full-time job, I'm a assistive technology specialist. And now I particularly focus on seniors who are blind or visually impaired. So these are mostly people that are finished in the workforce. They're retired, and maybe they've recently lost their vision in their 80s or their 90s, and they don't know anything about blindness, and they certainly don't know anything about audio description. And it really is cool to show someone for the first time Netflix and bring up an episode of something with audio description and have them hear the narration of what's happening on the screen. And they're just blown away because, they're at a mindset that their vision is gone and that television and movies are just something that's beyond them now. They don't realize that this technology, this service exists.
So those opportunities come to people, whether it's late in life or otherwise, that awareness that you bring in your full-time job is something that, it's just another aspect. It's really cool. It's really cool, Byron.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, where do you see audio description heading based on all these great changes that are happening and some of the other challenges that are happening?
I'm really excited about the future of audio description. I hope that it becomes synonymous with closed captioning has sort of captured the minds and hearts of the world. Every sports bar has a TV with some movie or news program or sports program or something with closed captioning on it. I want that to be the reality for audio description. I want a blind person to be able to have the assumption that if they turn on the television, that there will be audio described programming available and that it will become the norm. So that's of course the first thing. And I think we're getting closer and closer to it. I think that people are becoming more and more aware of it, and technologies are being developed to make it more possible. But I also am excited about the technology of audio description and advancing. So, for example, I want the ability to say, you know what, I don't necessarily need this entire movie described, but having the text messages or having the subtitles read to me out loud would be really helpful. Or, this audio description is great, but this action scene, there's a lot of really great music and sound effects there too, and the description is too verbose. And I want someone to be able to pick a channel of audio description. So not just one channel of audio description, but multiples, So you could have an audio description version that concentrates mostly on the sound effects and the environment of the movie, or you can have one that just really gives you a lot of granular detail of every single thing that's happening with every movement being described. You get a nice martial arts scene happening and you want to know every single move that's happening. You should be able to do that, or you should be able to pare it down to its most minimum version of audio description so that you don't have to hear it constantly all the time.
There you go. And it sounds like you're addressing one of the enemies of audio description, which is time. That, in between those lines of dialogue, there's so many opportunities. And also, to your point, also that you want to be able to experience without that nonstop voice talking, yapping in your ear nonstop. So those are great ideas.
Believe it
I
or
love
not,
it.
there are actually blind people that have told me they don't like audio description, which I think is really weird because I love it. But their biggest complaint is that, oh, it's just talking all the time. It's just nonstop yammering. And so I get that. I totally understand that. And that's why I want the technology to exist so that they can enjoy a movie without being, if there's something that happens on screen that is absolutely paramount that you have to be able to see to understand what's going on, yes, a narrator should come on screen and explain what's happening. But if they want that minimalistic audio description, they should be able to switch to that mode.
Yeah. And that's that kind of choice that empowers more audience. That's just another aspect of access.
You got it, buddy. Yep.
Very cool. What else would you like to share? Anything else that's
I guess I could tell you guys a little bit more about me and what I do outside of advocating for audio description and editing audio and stuff like that. I do a radio show on the internet and also on a few radio stations around the country called The Fun Zone. And so I play comedy and novelty music and things like that. So if anyone wants to check out my podcast, they can go to byronlee.com and download the archives of the show. And but yeah, I hope you guys will check that out.
Very cool. And that leads to the next question, which you've already answered. How can we follow you? It sounds like the website.
Sure.
ByronLee.com. Anything else?
Yeah. So ByronLee.com. And then, of course, there's my email address if anyone wants to email me there. My email is Byron@ByronLee.com. And you can also find me on Facebook. If you search for The Fun Zone with Byron Lee on Facebook, you'll find my Facebook group there, and people can submit videos or songs that they think I should play. And then, of course, I'm on Twitter, which is Byron27, or Facebook. You just look for Byron Lee.
Oh, thanks for this. This is great.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on, and I had a blast. And now I'm going to go edit it.
Yeah. Let's see how that goes.
All right. Thanks, Roy.